Let's go. Let's bring this board meeting to order. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dolly, can you please do roll call?
Supervisor Flaherty.
Here.
Councilman Abbott.
Here.
Councilwoman Capali. Present. Councilman Cahill.
Here.
Councilwoman Town Attorney Dennis.
Present. All right, our first agenda item tonight is a public hearing to consider an extension of the Consolidated Sewer District to include the Sienna Reserve Development. Attorney Genesi, if you could just give a brief description of this and why we're doing the public hearing before I open.
Well, it's under Article 12 and 12A. This is code in the town law, and it's an extension to the existing district. There's some question as to whether this is a townwide consolidated district or a townwide district. It is a district, and it's being formed by the developer of the new subdivision, which is called Sienna Reserve, and under the town law, whoever is proposing the extension to a particular sewer district has to provide to the town a plan and effectively petition and give this information to the Department of Public Works and Sewer Department and explain what they're doing. In this case, they're adding infrastructure for the sewer, or the extension to the townwide sewer district for the subdivision prior to the development of the district itself.
Well, and I don't mean to be overly simplified, but when we open the public hearing, there are either people that will speak on the pros side of this development being added to the sewer district, or people that will speak on the con side of this. So with that, I am opening the public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to speak on this? Well, not surprising. It's not that controversial. I've been a housekeeping on it, so I am going to close the public hearing. Okay, the next agenda item is our open to the floor, where each speaker will be allowed up to 5 minutes to really speak on anything that they would like to. Is there anybody that would like to speak to us?
Good evening. I'm Nesbitt, 1075 Railway Crossing, Westwood, New York. I'm here this evening to discuss item number 4 on tonight's agenda. It wants to disband Webster Special Police, and this item was just added to today's agenda just 7 hours ago. Why wasn't the process followed? It puts important items of the town board in the official town newspaper a week before the meeting, so residents can call and ask questions before the meeting date. That can't be done tonight, can it? No transparency. People found out about this 7 hours ago. And yet you're going to take an action tonight, says a resolution, on something that should be discussed with the Webster residents at a workshop or at some other time. My question would be, what is the hurry to disband the Webster Police, Special Police, after 30 years without a proper discussion with Webster residents? Has the town board done any studies on what the effect and cost are going to be to disband Special Police? And could you report those results to the Webster taxpayers? I'm sure Mr. Adams could figure out the hours worked by the Special Police and convert those hours into police overtime hours and give the residents that $100,000 number very easily. town board actually going to disband the Webster Special Police tonight without a plan going forward? Because it says here in the bottom, based on this research, it has been determined that the current configuration of the volunteers is not sustainable, and a new solution has to be created. What is the new solution? And how long does Webster have to wait for that solution? These are answers and questions that should have been answered before tonight's meeting. In fact, Supervisor Flaherty 2 weeks ago wrote a column on volunteerism in Webster, in fact encouraging it. But tonight you want to let go 25 dedicated and loyal members of the Webster Special Police into the night. So much for volunteerism in Webster. I think it's a senseless idea to disband the special police until this town board tells us why there isn't much more to say at this time. Maybe after the supervisor's dialogue, I will understand more. So that's all I have to say. I think it's not exactly proper that you did this on such short notice. I think there's a lot of residents in town who would like a better explanation, and I think you should postpone this vote until you give us that explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nesbitt. Is there anybody else that would like to take the podium? Okay. Our next agenda item, we have actually 4 board meetings minutes for consideration for approval. I'll start out. I have reviewed and I make a motion that we approve the December 9th Town Board Workshop.
Second. Supervisor Flaherty.
Aye.
Councilman Abbott.
Aye.
Councilman Cahill.
Aye.
Councilwoman Wynn. Abstain.
Jenny, you're already on your game. Nicely done. So that's a mistake I would have made in my first board meeting, is that I voted on it even though I wasn't. Good job.
I would move that we approve
Thank
the
you.
minutes of December 13th, 2021 special meeting.
Councilman Capaldi.
Aye.
Councilman Abbott.
Aye.
Councilwoman Cahill. Councilwoman Wynn. Abstain. Supervisor Flaherty.
Aye.
I would move to approve the December 16th minutes as submitted.
Second.
Councilman Abbott.
Aye.
Councilwoman Capaldi.
Aye.
Councilman Cahill.
Aye.
Councilwoman Wynn. Abstain. Supervisor Flaherty.
Aye.
I move that we approve the January 1st, 2022 swearing in and organizational meeting minutes.
Councilwoman Capaldi.
Aye.
Councilman Cahill.
Aye.
Councilwoman Wynn.
Aye.
Councilman Abbott.
Aye.
Supervisor Flaherty.
Aye. Patty, was it you?
Yeah.
It was Bill. How did you sneak in and out going slow? I snuck out. Bill, what do you think?
I reviewed the bills as submitted by the Director of Finance and recommend that we pay them as submitted.
Second.
Councilman Abbott.
Aye.
Councilwoman Capaldi.
Aye.
Councilman Cahill.
Aye.
Councilwoman Wynn.
Aye.
Supervisor Flaherty.
Aye. And I have reviewed the prepaid warrants as submitted by Paul Evans, our Director of Finance, and make a motion that we approve those.
Second.
Supervisor Flaherty.
Aye.
Councilman Cahill.
Aye.
Councilwoman Wynn.
Aye.
Councilwoman Capaldi.
Aye.
Councilman Abbott.
Aye.
All right, Pat. It's your first board meeting for this, huh? Well, resolution 2 and 3 are somewhat tied to each other, is that correct? Talking about the survey. Yeah. By highway law, I think it is, Charlie, the funds have to be pretty much by resolution, I don't want to say allocated, but put into the hands of the highway superintendent to spend appropriately. Is that a layman's term explanation?
That's, I would have said the same thing.
Okay. In Latin. So, yeah, I got it, okay. So, here's the motion for the agreement to spend town highway. This agreement motion between the town superintendent of the town of Webster, Monroe County, New York, and the undersigned members of the town board. Pursuant to the provisions of section 284 of highway law, we agree that money is levied and collected in the town for the repair and improvement of highways and received from the state for state aid for the repair and improvement of highways shall be expended as follows. 1. General repairs, the sum of $1,969,400 shall be set aside to be expended for primary work and general repairs upon the 137.46 center line miles of town highways, including sluices. Wow. Bill, I learned a new word there. Culverts and bridges having a span of less than 5 feet and boardwalks or the renewals thereof. 2. Permanent improvements. The following sum shall be set aside to be expended for the permanent improvements of highways, town highways. A. High Tower Way, 2,230 lane footage, 2,230 feet of lane footage, type, mill and paved, thickness 2 inches. B. Shadowwood Lane, 1,835 lane feet, type is mill and paved, thickness 2 inches. The expenditures on High Tower Way will be $264,032. The width of the traveled surface, 20 foot with gutters. The expenditures on Shadowwood Lane will be $75,006, and the width of the traveled surface, 20 foot with gutters. That is my motion.
Second.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilman Abbott?
Aye.
Councilwoman Capelli?
Aye.
Councilman Cahill?
Aye.
Councilwoman Wynn?
Aye.
Okay, and Dolly, as long as we got the gang here at the end, Pat, you as the superintendent, and the 5 town board members. All right, we'll execute this. And Dolly, I take it the original will be in the clerk's office, or is it, right? All right. And there you go. Okay. Yeah, you're right, they are. So number 3, Patty, if you wouldn't mind making that motion.
This is a motion to authorize the supervisor to allow the highway department to maintain the town hall parking lot and affiliated service roads up to, but not limited to, snow and ice removal.
Second.
Councilwoman Capelli?
Aye, but I want to add to the resolution, the motion, that to spend town highway funds budgeted for 2022 in the amount of $1,969,400. For Joe? No, that's the other one. Yes?
Yes.
Sorry, I've got both of those. All right, that's the end of my motion. Sorry.
Okay.
No, that's all right.
Councilwoman Capelli?
Aye.
Councilman Abbott?
Aye.
Councilman Cahill?
Aye.
Councilwoman Wynn?
Aye.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye. Okay, well, guess what? It is 7:44, and I will tell you this right now. I'm going to skip to the tabled item, the resolution to accept the Penfield sewer bypass IMA terms and authorize the supervisor to sign the IMA. We are going to be tabling that again. I think that, Charlie, I'll hand it to time you and the Penfield town attorney are.
That's fine.
Right?
I think it needs to be, okay.
Yeah. So I know that tentatively the plan was for the Penfield Town Board was going to vote on the same motion or same resolution last night. They tabled it. Hopefully you and I think it's Mr. Horwitz
Correct.
can get together and we can put this to bed hopefully at the next town board meeting. So that, I made a motion that we table the resolution to accept the Penfield sewer bypass and authorize the supervisor to sign the IMA.
Second.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye?
Councilman Cahill?
Aye.
Councilwoman Wynn?
Aye.
Councilwoman Capelli?
Aye.
Councilman Abbott?
Aye.
Okay, so really there's one formal item left on the agenda. And to me, this demands a little bit of presentation, discussion, Q&A amongst the board. so that we can decide whether the proper move tonight is to somewhat, for lack of better terms, shutter, disband, however you want to describe it, the special police in their current organizational structure. And then, as we'll discuss, the strategy to find out, to go down the path of a structure that does make sense for all the parties involved, including the officers of any volunteer organization or paid organization that are assisting the police department. For the town, citizens of the town, does it make sense for them? Does it make sense for the town board and the governance? It's got to make sense to all parties. And with that, Chief Kohlmeyer, I'm going to hand the baton to you for the start of this, because where certainly this is a resolution that did hit the agenda about 8 hours ago, but it is a discussion that started potentially at least 2 years ago. So, Dennis, if you can take it from here.
Would you prefer I go up to the microphone there, or can I go from here?
You're fine where you are.
Okay. So essentially, to give a little bit of a backstory here, I took over as chief March 1st. The special police have had basically 3 primary roles with the town. One of those is traffic control for call into emergency events or storms or situations that require assistance with road closures. Second one is presence at public events such as the Village Days, Webster Celebration, events like that. And the third one was the court security function they were performing for the town, doing weapon screening for people entering the courtroom. At my first meeting with the special police chief to talk about essentially taking over, he brought up a couple of concerns that he was voicing for the unit. One of them was safety. He advised they didn't feel safe doing court security function based on the current climate. What they were doing, he felt required additional weapon systems, tasers, and potentially firearms to make them feel safe in that function. And he asked me to look into 2 other issues that he felt had been pending for a while that hadn't had any resolution. One of those was, what is the coverage should one of the special police members be hurt while they're performing their duties for the town? And the second issue was whether they were actually volunteers or employees for the town of Webster. So I, at that point, immediately suspended the court security detail because of the safety concern they had. So that's where we transitioned to a contract armed court security for weapon screening. And I started to look into the other 2 issues that he presented, being the employment versus volunteer status and coverage for any type of injuries they might sustain while they were working. So in order to answer those questions, I engaged our insurance provider who forwarded and made contact with the workers' comp underwriter for the town of Webster to talk about what coverages were available. The answers that we got back essentially allowed for coverage of injuries, but not loss of wage protections for any member that was hurt with performing duties for the town, primarily because they weren't receiving any compensation from the town. But because they were non-compensated, they could not conclude their primary work that they did outside of the town as any kind of asset when it came to loss of wages when they got hurt working for the town. So the understanding was that there was a secondary insurance policy that would help compensate for loss of wages. So I looked into that policy. It's meager. It essentially provided $100 a week loss of wage protection with a $5,000 death benefit. So I attempted to get that coverage raised and was unsuccessful. Basically, the insurance providers felt that that was the max coverage to extend based on the risk assessment for the duties and responsibilities for the position. So the action at that time, we talked to the board in executive session about some of the things that we needed to consider. We felt that I felt personally that it was unsafe to put the special police in a position of performing duties for the town without having the coverage until we resolve that issue. Particularly because of their concerns about safety and their concerns about any compensation they might receive if they got hurt. During the course of that, it also led to the conversation and investigation into whether, investigation research into whether they were considered employees or volunteers. And that basically led to the determination from the Department of Criminal Justice Services, which is a state-level organization that oversees all peace and police officer certification in the state of New York, that the special police members could not be volunteer peace officers. They have to be employees of the town of Webster. They do not allow volunteer peace officers in New York State. So there, I think, is some confusion on how this started, because initially special police were short backstory, I guess. The auxiliary police for the town of Webster was the original organization that the town received these volunteer services from, and that was under the authority of the county through civil cuts. And my understanding, I don't know the exact date, but I believe that started in like 1956 or so, maybe 53. And in 1997, Monroe County disbanded the auxiliary police civil defense capabilities. So it was at that time, in 1997, that the town created the special police unit as we have it now, under the authority of New York Town Law 158, which at the time gave special police the power of constable. And it wasn't until later that the state added special police to the peace officer powers in New York State that I think we come in conflict with the volunteer versus employed situation we have right now. So the two things that basically are still unresolved are the fact that they cannot be volunteer peace officers in New York State, and that's basically the foundational issue that we have here tonight. And the second one is that they don't have loss of wage protection should they get hurt, and there isn't a secondary policy that's sufficient to cover that gap if they don't get compensated for the town of Webster. So I think that's the summary, unless there's further explanation needed on that.
No, I would say, and that's it's a very good summary. You're being humble in a lot of ways, because I think since you've gotten on board March 1st, the amount of due diligence you've done, bringing in specific labor attorneys to opine on this. Unfortunately, our HR director, Brayton Connor, was not able to make it tonight. He's been very much involved in this process. A process that was always trying to figure out how to resolve many of the things that Chief just described, the organizational conflicts that the special police structure has. I'm very satisfied that it has been a thorough due diligence, and it was one that was had as its compass to fix it. The police, and I've had many meetings with you. You value what the special police officers bring to the community. It's a very valuable resource. I know from talking to my fellow town board members, we value that. I know from talking to the special police officers that they take a lot of pride and they want to get back there, back out doing the job. And this is what makes it such an interesting situation, is that Just as recently as 2 nights ago, Chief, myself, and Patty Cataldi, who is in 2022 the liaison to the police department, we met with the special police for 2 hours. Because we wanted to make sure that they understood and got a chance to ask questions and you know, where are they at? Because one thing that I think hasn't been brought up is that and what is the proper terminology? Have they been deactivated since September?
You can use the word deactivated. I paused all activations essentially. So
Yeah.
in order for them to operate, we have to basically approve the authorization for them to go out and actually perform either a public event or respond to an emergency. So basically with the current questions about the coverage, we just stopped the activations until this has been resolved.
Yeah. So when we met with the special police on Tuesday night, and that's a meeting unfortunately we've been trying to have for a month or two, and we're all busy, and unfortunately, in fact, Special Police Chief Charlie couldn't make it tonight. He has a business dinner. I know in some previous attempts we made to sit down monthly meetings of the Special Police, he was out of town business. And we didn't feel it appropriate that we should be talking to the Special Police Department about this and Q&A-ing it without their chief there. So Tuesday night was the first time that was an opportunity. That unfortunately meant that for 4+ months, the Special Police have been on the sidelines. They've been on the sidelines when we've had the turkey trot. They've been on the sidelines when we had the Christmas, well, it wasn't a parade this year in the village, it was more at Veterans Park. So it's been very visible that where are the Special Police? And I don't think probably the community, some of the community knew about these issues that we were running into. The Special Police on Tuesday night, I think I might have said no less than 7 times. To me, there are 3 options at this point. They can stay deactivated, or whatever you want to call it, on the sidelines. And that's somewhat of an untenable situation for them. Because at the end of the day, January 15th is a looming date where, as peace officers, which they have all obtained that certification, that licensure, correct, Chief?
Correct.
On January 15th is when the annual re-register, where the town as the municipality will basically let them hang their license, let them hang their certification and attach it to the town. So their certification is their licensure. That's their license as a peace officer in New York State, correct?
That is correct.
And that is on them individually to perform the various continuing education things that are needed to make sure they keep their license, their certification.
Well, yes and no. So yes, it's they have to be assigned to an organization or do that. They can't do that independently.
Okay.
But the basis is they have if they've served less than 2 years with the Special Police, they have 2 years of active certification to either come back to this town or go to another town that is seeking peace officer applications. If they serve more than 2 years, then they have 4 years of certification.
Right.
So I guess the differentiation is the registry under the town of Webster is different from their certification status as an individual.
On Saturday, January 15th, if the town registers them in the annual registration, it puts those 18 officers, and that's how many people are on the Special Police Force at this time, correct?
Yes.
Okay. those 18 special police officers now have their peace officer certification, their licensure, affiliated, registered with the town of Webster, where they're going to be kept on the sidelines. Keeping them on the sidelines is, to me, an untenable option in this. And I think, based on the feelings from the special police officers the other night, it's an untenable option for them, too. The second option is put them back out on the street. And God knows, Daddy, I don't know about you, but the other night, they were like, hey, we get it. We don't have insurance. We did whatever. We signed up. We're volunteers. We'll go out there. We'll sign a waiver. I've talked to the board about this. You know, one of the main duties of government is to protect. I think it's unconscionable if we as a board, now that we know what we know, we know they don't have that coverage. I don't know about prior leadership and whether they knew, but we do know. And I don't think we feel comfortable putting them back out in the street. Mr. Kohlmeyer is here taping this tonight. At the meeting the other night, he's one of the special police officers, said that over the years there's been 3 injuries. God willing, they were not serious injuries. Your exact words. I don't want to take that back going into 2022. In this day and age, with the way society is now, to put them back out on the street, knowing what we know, that's untenable. That's unconscionable, immoral, in my opinion. So that leaves a third option. And that is, regardless of how you want to describe the semantic, I called it shuttering the other night, proving that I'm from the mortgage business. That's what companies did. They shuttered their business. Mr. Kohlmeyer said, do you mean disbanding the current structure? Yes. Disbanding it, in that decision, means that now we're not holding hostage 18 peace officers. If they want to register with another municipality, they can do so, instead of, and go and do what they want to do, which is be out in the street. I hope they don't do that. But I think it would not be fair of the town to hold them back past January 15th. And I also think, and this was discussed at great length the other night, is that this is not an in a vacuum decision. If the board tonight decides to vote on disbanding the special police, and we don't take that lightly. After 1956 auxiliary and converting in 1997 to special police. We said at that meeting that we would roll right into next Thursday night as being the first, if you want to call it, at the town board workshop, bringing the parties together, collaboration on how do we build a model that makes sense in 2022 for the people on the street, whether it's volunteer or paid. A model that makes sense for the police department, so that they, because that would probably, it'll be under them, I would guess, any model we come up with. A model that makes sense legally with insurance coverages, so we as a board feel good about the fact that you're out there on the street and we don't have to think if something terrible happens that you're in the current situation you're in. The good news is I think we're probably 6 months ahead on the vetting of some of those options. And there are many of them, aren't there, Dennis?
Yeah, we've definitely identified some options.
And those will be articulated next week as the start of the process. And what I would like to see in that process is that there is the police department, there is the town leadership, and there is the special police leadership at the table, utilizing the resources that we've already tapped into, and some that we haven't. We've tapped into labor attorneys, we've tapped into insurance agents. HR. We haven't really tapped into civil service yet. We've got an overview of it. But we could get some access to civil service. So hopefully, the path to the option that makes the most sense is come up with sooner than later. And I'm an impatient guy, so I'd like it to be sooner than later. But the question of, well, why don't we just keep them on the sidelines until we figure this out? I think that's a terrible decision. I think it's an unfair decision to the 18 officers. And I articulated that the other night at the meeting, that the sense of urgency of doing this by all the sides is to end the current structure, which unequivocally, irrefutably has holes in it. Whether past leadership, when it started in 1997, knew that and just didn't, they wanted to look the other way, I don't know. I don't care. This leadership knows it. We have looked at every option possible to plug the holes of the current structure. It doesn't work. There is no magic pill to do it. So the best option is to put an end to the current structure and work with whoever wants to work with us, whether that's Mike Charlin. I don't know the organizational structure, if there's lieutenants and sergeants and whatever, how it works in the Special Police Department, or if it's just they're all officers. But whoever wants to come to the table, who genuinely wants to come up with something that works today, in today's society, and you made a great point at the end of that meeting the other night. There's two forms of risk for police departments right now, isn't there, Dennis?
Yes, sir.
Physical risk. The scrutiny that you're under. The scrutiny you're under in the last 18 months, let's just call it what it is. 24 months. You got bail reform, you've got the George Floyd situation, you've defund police efforts, all this stuff. Police are under a lot of pressure right now. Eyes are on it. It actually led, in a lot of ways, to why we have body cameras today, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now the physical risk of altercations with someone is one thing. But what about the civil risk? And you brought up something the other night that I thought was sobering. In fact, I watched the faces of the attendees in Special Police, and you could see that they were shocked by it. And it's that previous to 2020, the police department in the last 10 plus years had 3 civil suits.
I don't know the exact number, but maybe 1 or 2 at a time if there was one, you know.
How many have we had in the last 18 months?
We had 5 at one point, at the same time.
This is the society we're in. The police department is now under that pressure and getting more training and different training. That risk is making it such that the special police, it doesn't work going into 2022 for reasons we've already articulated, and to me a lot more. I'm an idealist. I think that there is an answer out there, but I don't think that we just keep them on the sidelines until we figure it out, because it's not fair to them. And yes, I did write an article about volunteerism, but one thing that I didn't write in that 500-word article is that a volunteer should be out there with the risk associated where their family is left high and dry if they get hurt. In most volunteer positions, even when I volunteered as a coach for Webster Youth Hockey, if I got hurt on the ice, you should have saw the coverages we had for me. Way beyond what the special police had. Think about that. Does,
I just do
Danny,
that,
go ahead.
based on your last statement with respect to the coverage that you had when you were volunteering as a hockey coach, what other insurance carriers did you look into, or you specifically in special police, to have better coverage than they currently have?
My request was through the association the town uses to identify possibilities for extending them coverage above and beyond. So I guess I just want to make sure we're clear that the coverage is one aspect of it based on the fact that they're not compensated. The foundational issue with the special police title is that fact that they're volunteers and not employees, and you can't be a volunteer peace officer. So I think that's where the discussion has been, and what we had the other night with special police members is that there are potential options that don't involve a peace officer status that may have different ability to cover volunteerism. It's not necessarily just the coverage. I think the issue is that, from my understanding, is that if you had compensation for the special police, the loss of wage protection is taken care of. But the state says you can't volunteer as a peace officer. The exact word was if they're volunteers, the town considers them volunteers, they need to be removed from the registry. So
From the town registry,
From
but
the
they
town-
can still certify and go someplace else, correct?
if they're considered employees at those other places,
Okay.
that there can't, so according to the Department of Criminal Justice Services, in New York State, you cannot be a volunteer peace officer. You have to be an employee of an organization. So I don't know how other organizations are going to do it or will do it moving forward. I just, from the inquiry I made to them, the response I got, the clarification, was that they cannot be volunteers.
What's the cost of making them an employee? Town board looked at it? I'm sorry to talk out of order, but this is my point. You're having a discussion, I had to talk first, I can't talk last. I got questions, community has questions.
I do
No,
have a question.
you know what, I'll get back to this in a second, and certainly you've got to know that on the tape, unless you're up at the microphone, nobody even heard that, so unless the two gentlemen in the back of the tape had heard it, so maybe keep going, but we'll come back to that.
I just want to expand on my questions. So they can be certified as long as it's, but we're not going to, they wouldn't be on our registry, correct?
Correct, so the registry and the certification are different.
Right,
So they maintain their certification.
Yes.
So basically, it doesn't work like I get certified, my certification is good for 2 years or 4 years. The way it works is that you get your certification, and as long as you're actively employed as a peace officer, it carries through that time period. When you stop service as an employed peace officer, then the clock starts depending on your length of service. It's either 2 years from the end of that service or 4 years, depending on how long you serve. So the registry is a different thing.
Right.
So like when I retired, it works the same way for police officers.
Yeah.
So I had active police officer certification. I retired from the town of Webster. I had 4 years of active certification left, but I came off the town of Webster registry.
Right.
And then when I got rehired, they added me back to the registry under the town of Webster. So my certification was individual to me with New York State, but the registry is to the agency. So basically, we're telling the state of New York that these people are employed by the town of Webster and acting as peace officers on behalf of the town of Webster.
And John, to that point, just in the last 48 hours, because we found out what Chief just said.
Right.
And we were a little surprised that that wasn't knowledge by the special police force. That's okay, we found it out, and we were able to let the special police chief and rank and file know what you just said. So that spawned off that really, as of January 15th, the 18 people on the force, if we disband, now they we're not re-registering them because January 15th, we wouldn't have special police officers. They're still certified as peace officers.
Right.
And they're certified for 2 or 4 more years.
Right.
So some of them have said, look, I don't want to do this job for other municipalities. My heart's in Webster. So they've somewhat intimated, they'll sit on the sidelines as we figure out some structure that makes sense today and hopefully for the next few years. Others have said, is there a way we can retire now in New York State as a peace officer? I don't know the answer to that. If there's some, I mean, certainly there's no pension or anything like that. I don't think there is. But that would be an option they could do. And then the third option is that obviously since their certification, their license, their individual license is still good, if they say, and some of them did say at the meeting, I might go to Greece, I might go to wherever, and hang my license, my certification there, and be on their registration. That's what I see as the possible options. What I hope is that there's more of the former, which is my heart's in Webster. So work with us. Work with Chief and the leadership of the police. Work with myself, and I'm sure Patty, you'll be at the table because of liaisonship. And let's figure this out. And it's not an easy answer because I've been in these meetings and I got a lot of notes. And it is a spider web of a flowchart of if, then, and you run into roadblocks everywhere. I know, and it might end up that they're paid. It might end up a civil service position. Exempt, non-exempt, tested, I don't know.
So this resolution, so that I understand this properly, is the legal step to disband so they're not on the register. So if January 15th comes and goes, and we don't go through this resolution process, what happens? Are they automatically re-registered?
No, so January 15th, I have to go in and certify that they are with the town of Webster and they've had the appropriate training with the town of Webster to act as peace officers in New York State.
Okay, so this essentially says you're not going to do that, this resolution.
Well, so there's no need to do it if we're doing the resolution because once they...
So this is the vehicle to get to that?
This is the vehicle to take them off the peace officer registry with New York State under the town of Webster.
And actually, John, the motion, if and when it's made tonight, would be to disband the Dutchess Police Unit in its current organizational structure as of 11:59 p.m. Eastern on Friday, January 14th. And there's some, the January 15th date is a seminal date within registering, or, for the town to hang their certification, their individual license with us. But it also, like I said, the 3 options of the special police officers are what they want to do. That's 8 days away. How many of them in the interaction we'll have with them in the next 7 days leading up to the workshop next week, I hope that a lot of them will want to be involved in finding the solution. And we said the other night, John, that, it's funny, Mr. Nesbitt, who was obviously the previous supervisor, said in his time on the podium, the 25 officers. He's a nostalgic guy. There were 25 officers in 2013. By 2017, it was down to 23. When I came in 2020, it was down to 21. And going into this year, it's at 18. Now, we could surmise and speculate all day long why over the last 8 or 9 years is that membership in the police, the special police department, going down. It isn't a magic pill where you can say it's 18 today because of bail reform and they aren't able to do security at the courthouse. That's not true. Those numbers I just gave show that it was already trending down. And one of the things I said the other night, Mr. Kohlmeyer, you can hopefully attest to this, is that one of the things we want to create in the model is something that the new organizational structure can recruit to. Something that you just feel as if you could recruit and build a robust group. They're certainly passionate. I mean, the ones that were there the other night, they're passionate.
Well, I think their passion was spelled out by you, from the officers who said they would be willing to sign waivers. That's a commitment to the town of Webster in and of itself. And it does, it speaks to their character and commitment. With respect to the declining numbers of volunteers, you're seeing that across all sorts of agencies across the country. Volunteerism as a whole is declining. That's a pretty sad testimony, in my opinion. Those officers that are currently with us are committed, and I think, as you have said over and over, we need to do something sooner than later. And it's just, it's a bit disheartening that we haven't gotten there yet, from my perspective, because I think that would be fantastic if we had been able, but I know we found this out at a late date, and a lot of meetings have taken place over the last few months, and the hours that you and our HR department supervisor and other board members have been involved in this, and the special police, to try and come up with a resolution. Just goes to commitment that we're trying to get there. I just wish we were there right now.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, like I said, tonight this has turned into a pseudo workshop before a resolution, because we started at 7:44. It's now 8:24, so we've had, I think if I do the math here, that's 40 minutes. What I kind of envision, assuming we do a semblance of this resolution and it passes, and we do end the current organization structure of the special police, I kind of envision next Thursday's workshop, Chief will be right back here. To the extent that Mike Charlin will be here, I don't know his work schedule, or if he would have one of his lieutenants, and I don't know if that's Mr. Holmeyer, if that's Joe Monachino. Brayton, it will be here. So there would probably be a presentation of the last 6 months of work of the various options, at least that are on, that we've seen right now. And they all have their pros and cons. And several of them are paid, because that pay as an employee takes care of a lot of coverages and things like that. But some of that spurts, clicks in civil service, which gets into a whole other muckety-muck thing. The thing that and it didn't surprise me at all, the passion and the dedication of the special police, I don't think there's a money issue with them at all. Never has been. Never, ever has that been really, brought to the table as a main motivator of theirs at all. So, anyway. Bill?
Well, I hate to see this go this way. I understand the laws that say they have to be paid in order to carry that certification. Are we willing to take them all on as paid employees? That's a decision this board has to talk about. We have not talked about that yet. We don't know what that might cost us. If you put them on as employees, and they'd be part-time employees, based on the number of hours they work. That's a question you need to know. Those are all things we need the answers to. I would just soon go to the workshop and try to resolve some of those things, and do the resolution at the workshop. But that's just my own opinion.
Chief, did you also say that under civil service there was no job description for a peace officer?
For special.
For special?
So HR research that there is no title in civil service for a special police officer. So the assumption that we were operating under was that special police was considered exempt in civil service, but paperwork was never filed to create that title. So I'll give you the layman's terms of my interpretation. When civil service creates a position, it by default goes to the competitive class, which has to be tested. You can petition to have that job title moved to the exempt class. So you first petition Monroe County, the local level, for them to move it to exempt. And if they approve it, they then move it to the state level for the state to approve it to be an exempt class as well. None of that process occurred apparently for the special police title, so there is no title to pay them under for that. There's been some discussion on special police officers being paid, but that's not a current title that you can use. So there would have to be a process to create a special police title, and then have the state identify the testing requirements for that as a peace officer position. And then we would have to talk about what the hiring requirements are for hiring somebody under a peace officer position for the town of Worcester.
Before we investigate the deeper offense.
I will say this, that, Bill, what you just stated, it has merit, because number one, next Thursday is 13th, so it is before the 15th. You know, it's, we usually don't do resolutions at workshops, but it's not unprecedented. It certainly, you know, would extend this discussion on, and there would be a lot of discussion, I'm sure, Chief, between Patty, you and myself, and the special police leadership. And like I said, some of them are asking about how to retire as a peace officer. I'm not sure what they mean by that.
I don't know if there isn't a retirement for special police. The town would have to have been contributing to a retirement fund for.
Yeah, I don't think the motivation is thinking there's a pension or something. I think maybe it's like, can I retire before January 15th, before the disband?
Well, so I think.
I don't know that for a fact, though. I haven't.
So I think the question that came up under was they weren't sure what their status was. They thought if January 15th didn't happen, they lost their certification. I researched that with the DCGS, and that's not the case. That's where we verified that it's a 2 or 4 year window for certification to remain valid.
And just for the record on that, you know, once again, Mr. Colmer, I had said on Tuesday night, if we find out the answer from the DJ or the DCJS, is that by January 15th, us not re-registering them affects their individual license certification as a peace officer, you'd have my word, we will not do that then. We will not take those 18 officers and all of a sudden put the, you know, certification licensure they've achieved and continuing education they've done to keep it, if all of a sudden us not re-registering them negates all of their individual licensure and certification. Well, the good news was that's not the case. They're 2 to 4 years still certified, still licensed as peace officers subsequent to January 15th if we don't register them because we don't have anything to register them to. So, you know, I can't stress enough, and I'm going to say it again, I think, in, you know, in this day and age, you know, it's, I don't know, keeping them in a deactivation status on the sidelines, go through January 15th, re-register them, say, hey, you know, we'll work this all out. I just think that's a bad move. I've seen enough in just organizational things that the urgency to come up, to get people to the table, to come up with the answer, there's got to be that urgency, and I think the way to create that, the best way to create that urgency so that we get the parties at the table, is that you've disbanded the current organization. Structure.
I think Bill makes a very good and valid point that we do have an opportunity to have further discussions with additional parties who were not able to make it to this meeting, which I feel are integral for the board to hear their input. And I have no problem, just speaking for myself, of tabling this resolution until the next board meeting.
I don't even know if we have a table. Do we have to have a motion to table this resolution? I guess we could.
think it'd be better form to do it, yeah.
Okay.
This is on the agenda.
Well, like I said earlier, the bill made a lot of sense, especially since it, you know, is before January 15th. I'm not committed to having this thing end tonight. I think there's a lot of merit to having it go out to the 13th. I'm gonna make a motion that we table any resolution to disband the special police unit in its current organizational structure until the workshop of Thursday, December 13th.
Second that motion.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye?
Councilman Cahill?
Aye.
Councilwoman Wynn?
Aye.
Councilwoman Talby?
Aye.
Councilman Adams?
Aye.
Well, that concludes the formal meeting agenda items tonight. We'll have the phone, do I got it on? I'll take it out, do not disturb for anybody that wants to call in. And we'll do our normal kind of around the room. Chief, are you all talked out?
Unless somebody's got further questions for me, I'm good.
Thanks for your input tonight.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Pat, thanks for coming in.
No problem.
That
Thanks for
is,
working on the agreement, and we're out there plowing snow whenever it comes. It comes snow with us. Kind of business as usual down there, getting ready for that, getting into the groove of that process, and just, you know, the guys are still down there working hard, so.
great. Bill?
We had a kickoff meeting with MRB Group concerning the future highway garage. It was an interesting meeting, and got a lot of massaging to do. We're just in the beginning. And also Parks and Rec, they're ready to go, and can't wait to get moving on in that.
I do this correctly. Hello? Hi, you've called into the Webster Town Board meeting.
Hi, this is Ken Corbus.
Hello, Ken. We certainly can.
I have a question. I don't know that you'd be able to answer it or you want to entertain it, but I would like to know what other towns in the area are doing with respect to their special or auxiliary or whatever they call the volunteer police force.
It's an excellent question, and Chief, do you mind if I hand the baton back to you?
Yeah,
And I'm going to hang up and listen to it.
All right, thanks, Ken.
yeah, so obviously as part of this process, I leaned on the other chiefs in Monroe County that have special police units, and to be honest, they're unfamiliar with some of the questions we're asking. The questions haven't been asked in their organizations, they haven't had the research that we've done. So at this point, they're going to have to make an assessment on what they do with their organization. So I don't have any concrete answers to it as to what they're doing or what they're going to do, but I have had conversations with each of the chiefs that have special police units in our county.
You know what's funny, Chief, and we've talked about this a little bit offline, is that I said earlier, you know, I think one of the main duties of the government is to protect. Also, I have said that, you know, I think our main job on the town board, a lot of it, you think about how much in the budget process we dedicate. We're protecting the citizens' money. And sometimes those are in conflict. Because, hey, we get volunteer special police out there, it doesn't cost us a dime in the budget. Until you look at the fact that, well, can we really look at ourselves in the mirror with the way that's structured if something happened to one of them? So, was that worth saving the buck?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely some risk assessment. I think next week at the workshop, we can talk about a bunch of things, including what are the services that the town of Webster is looking for from either a volunteer or part-time employee in regards to public events. Right now, the peace officer title is a very powerful title. We have to, I guess, evaluate whether the town thinks that that's an appropriate title moving forward for what we're looking for from whatever group we're talking about beforehand. I did, to piggyback back to the question on other units, I did take the operating structures and the resolutions for other agencies in our county and sent them to the attorney as well. to get a perspective on whether they had different language or wording that would have fixed one of any of the issues that we were seeing here, and the answer was no. There wasn't anything that that we could alter in order to change the legal issue that we're looking at as far as the volunteer/employee.
Well, as Charlie has taught me, besides Latin the last 2 years, we can't, as a town, just all of a sudden say, we're gonna create a local law that supersedes a state law in many cases, in almost all cases.
Not at all, but yeah.
But,
Sure.
and some of what you ran into, and you know, is that just because a town came up with a law to set up a certain auxiliary police or special police or handling it a certain way, doesn't mean it jives with the various agencies that define employment and peace officers and all that.
Yeah, to be honest, I think one of the biggest issues we've had is since the special police unit was created in '97, there's been an evolution of law.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's really what's happening.
Yeah.
But I think when it was created, both the auxiliary and then the evolution to special police, 40 years later, there have been considerable changes in the last 25 years.
Yeah, and right now the biggest hang-up is the peace officer requirements from New York State. So having the peace officer title attached to the special police through the legal process doesn't allow us to separate it out and still continue. And that's really what it comes down to is, we'll talk about it next week, obviously in more depth, but if there isn't the ability to separate the peace officer title from the special police title, because they're tied together in the criminal procedure law and Town Law 158, then I think we have to look at some other type of title or unit if we're going to move that direction. So,
Do you have any suggestions? You can answer that.
yeah. So next
That'd
week,
be very, very helpful.
yeah, I think one we're going to start with the general discussion on what the board is looking for from this type of unit, and then what type of powers are appropriate for that type of unit, and we'll look at the volunteer non-peace officer, part-time paid non-peace officer, part-time peace officer, and the titles that civil service may have available to us. So again, Brayton will be our best expert for that. So.
Brayton, John, there's one of the towns, their quote special police was doing court security, and it was found that, well, they do court security under a civil service title or something like that.
Yeah, so they weren't being paid or performing any duties under the special police title. The special police was separate, distinct when they were doing the public events. They were actually getting paid as court bailiffs for the town services they were providing. So there was a misperception that the special police were being paid in court security, and they were actually two separate, distinct.
But, so the people who were doing the court security were special police, but they were not doing it in that capacity. They just happened to, it just happened to be because of their training, et cetera, they were used for court security.
Correct. Yeah. And really what it comes down to is the state requirements that they put on the peace officer title is also a complicating factor with the civil service application, from my understanding. So it's not just as simple as creating a new civil service title that we want to pay people under. It's creating a peace officer civil service title, which ties into the whole network of New York State, because in this criminal procedure law, special police is only one of like 60 subsections of peace officer. I mean, anything from a fire marshal to fire investigator, campus security, or peace officer. There's like 60 different subsections to what a peace officer is. So it's complicated.
Right. Well, we appreciate it very much. I know that I said this before, I'm going to say it again. Many, many hours of research that I conducted by yourself and Brayden, and I'm sure Special Police Chief also. So it would be very beneficial for me anyways, at the next meeting, to have everybody in the room, and let's just have that dialogue and figure out, where we're going to go.
Unless another call comes in. We're up to you, Patty.
I don't really have much to add this evening. I don't want people to think that we don't want to hear from the public on their sentiments about the special police, because I think we pretty much know that the entire community values what they bring to this town. That being said, those emotions and those sentiments can't change the facts of what we've discovered. And in meeting with the special police the other night, I heard their passion and that they just want to do this for the town, and they don't care about the line, they don't care about, they're not compensated, they'll sign the waivers, the whole thing, and that's all fine, and I really applaud them for that, but should something happen to one of them, and I have to face their family after that and tell them that, I'm very sorry of the death of your loved one, but all you're going to get is $5,000, and that's not even covered the funeral. I can't sleep at night with that. Once I've discovered this, it breaks my heart that we have to be making this decision, but I think we have to figure out how to do it right, and we'll come to that. And I did really try to assure those that were in attendance at that meeting that it is our intention to figure out how to rebuild this. We're not going to let this drop.
Well, and Patty, you and I had a conversation earlier today, and I've always been a believer that you can't just meet somebody and automatically respect and trust them. That comes with crossing bridges of experience with them. So I totally understand that some of the special police are skeptical on whether whether Dennis and his leadership team, and whether myself and our town leadership team are going to genuinely come to the table and work with them to try to find a structure that works today and for the future. I totally understand that. I'm hoping in 3 months that they at least can say, they showed up and they were, in the game with them, trying to come up with something. Because we do value what they do. And the irony, and Mr. Nesbitt said it, here's a guy that just wrote an article on volunteerism. You think the irony is not lost on me? That now we're taking a volunteer organization and shuttering it, disbanding it, or considering? That's, I don't even know what to say. But, like I said.
Well, given what we now know from your research and discovery, I think it's very important, right, that we move in that direction. But thank goodness you did find that out, because I'd rather have it found out now, and God forbid we have a tragic accident and we start doing research and then we find out after the fact. And given the fact that you've also talked to a lot of these towns, I'm pretty sure a lot of these chiefs will be relying on a lot of information that you've given them, so they can do also their due diligence, so they don't put their peace officers in a situation such as this. I'm just speculating, but I'm pretty sure.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head, John. I think, they're waiting to see how we do this. It wouldn't surprise me if we end up being the model.
Yeah.
It's funny, not funny at all, but something we didn't even talk about tonight is that, until January of last year, for several years, the special police were under the town board.
Right.
And reported to the town board. And as of January of 2021, they reported to the police chief of the police department, which is the right structure, no question about that. One of, I think, the unintended consequences of the special police being under the town board is probably the town board. We're not police officers, we're not in law enforcement, so we didn't really oversee them per se to various things that they were doing and trainings and all that stuff. Any semblance of this makes sense that it would be under the police department, so Dennis and his leadership team would have their fingers on the pulse of what such an organization is doing. And within that, I don't know when peace officers came about. It wasn't 1997 that our auxiliary police became special police and then immediately became peace officers. Is that correct?
To be honest, I don't know when that number was implemented. It was after 1997.
It was sometime early 2000, 2005, somewhere in that range, I'm pretty sure, Dennis,
Yeah.
when they started to go to school to get the education to become peace
Right.
officers.
Now,
Not by the direction of the town, but by their own decisions that that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
and, you know, Bill, it's
And I'm not
like,
sure if that didn't create the issue right then when that happened.
Yeah.
I mentioned that Tuesday night.
it's possible, but here's the thing, and I mean, this one bothered me more than the insurance coverage issue. And it's the indemnification gap, I'll call it. And the indemnification gap is that once they became peace officers, what the state says, you tell me if I'm wrong, chief, a police officer can go to on a scale of 1 to 10 with force. Let's say the state says you can go to 10. This board, back a few years ago, basically came out and said, yeah, well, we don't want you to go past 5. Is that essentially?
So essentially, there's a couple of things I think to highlight there is peace officer to peace officer to peace officer in New York State, no matter what unit they're with. So the powers of a peace officer are defined by the criminal procedure law. They have the ability to make arrests, use force, all the things to effect an arrest that come with that title. The board sets their own level of operational authority for the special police within their jurisdiction. And there's potentially a gap between what the board tells the special police they're authorized to do and what the New York State powers of a peace officer tell them to do. So the gap you're talking about is that they act within the scope of the peace officer status, but outside of the scope of their operation from the town of Webster, are they exposing themselves to liability and potentially creating a gap where they may not have the indemnification
Personal
for their
liability.
actions, personal liability, because they're acting outside of the scope of authority.
Right.
If you take back to the conversation when they got their spray and batons issued to them, the board's directive at the time was that those were for personal protection and not for to effect an arrest essentially or for taking somebody into custody. It was for protection because of a safety concern. So the gap there is between the authority they have as a peace officer to make that arrest. You take a special police officer out at the carnival in the crowd when a fight breaks out in front of them. Do they stand by and report that? Do they use their peace officer training to actually apply force to separate that fight, take people into custody? I think that's part of the conversation we have going forward is to, even if we come to an agreement on what this unit looks like, what is the authority that the town is going to give them to operate with? So we kind of held back on a lot of that conversation because we're still working on the foundation, and we found the foundation's cracked. We haven't talked about what's going to built on top of it. But yeah, the gap between peace officer powers and what the town board operational authority is for the special police are two different levels that we have to be cognizant of.
Continue this.
Well,
Charlie?
I think we had a good discussion so far, and I actually want to commend the board, police chief, the leadership of the department heads who were involved, who really setting the case on this. This is something that nobody's really looked at, and it's nobody's fault.
No.
I think there's been changes in what's taken place, and I think as a lot of you have said, we're now aware of so many things that are getting followed through. It's going to require diligence and work.
Couldn't agree with you more, Charlie. John? Jenny?
Well, I would like to thank you for your service. You know, as always, I know what everyone will do. Our community loves the police, and especially among friends. So whatever the decision that we are as the board, you know, and collaboration with everything else, will be the best for everyone. And that's what we're going to be doing. That's why.
Did you have anything else?
I just wanted to add one more thing. I know the short notice for the meeting, I was just a talking point. I just wanted to point out that one of the discussion points we had was we wanted to make sure the special police heard from us first, that they weren't seeing something posted on an agenda. So part of that was a logistics issue, making sure that we sat down with them personally talked to them about where we were at and what the issues were. So I know it may have appeared that this popped up last minute, because it did, but in intent, it was to meet with them. After that meeting, they posed a question to us. We wanted to make sure that we answered, which was their certification status. So it took time to get that answered, and that was what delayed the announcement notification. So I just want to make sure it's put out there that it was in good intent to make sure that they were being communicated with directly and not seeing it someplace else.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment? Do you want me to make a comment?
You know what, Mr. Goyer, if you want to jump up on the podium, I mean, we're this far, Bill.
Hi, my name is Gene Holmeyer. One of the special police officers involved with this. I just want to bring attention to the town board, a lot of you knew, that behind you is a sign that basically states that Webster is a good place to live. It's partly because of the special police and the auxiliary police before them. I am a 58-year member of both of those organizations and have grown up with the special police and auxiliary police operation ever since it was authorized under the Civil Defense Organization, which actually was 1953, just bannering some dates around there. So the importance is that I've seen the town grow from 3 police officers that were in the regular police department at that time and 1 village police officer into what we are today and what they are today, and the town now covers the village area. So we have contributed a lot over this time to the Where Life is Worth Living model that is up there for the town of Webster. And I know you're going to make every effort now to go forward and try and fix this essentially state level issue. But I think the town would be better to do that and continue this support that we can do for the police department to continue making that model work. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
And Mr. Kohlmeyer, I'm hoping, if you can get back up on the podium for a second, because I got a question for you.
Oh, okay.
To anybody who's not surprised, you can't make this stuff up. Mr. Kohlmeyer is Chief Kohlmeyer's father, for people who didn't know that. I don't think the apple falls far from the tree. I'm very impressed the way your son operates and does due diligence and researches things. I've also been very impressed with your other son, TK. So I think that either your wife is brilliant, or maybe both of you did something that made them the way they are. And I'm guessing it's the latter, because I've also seen how you operate. And I would just like to know, as we venture into this, Mr. Kohlmeyer, will you help us? Will you come to these meetings? I mean, I don't know if you have to go through Mike Charlin for that, but I certainly would be happy if somebody like you who's got that kind of history in the town is at the table to help us with the compass of trying to figure this out.
I will participate in any way I can.
Thank you. That would be great.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Goldberg.
I also just want to shed some light on how difficult this situation has been, considering the fact that our chief of police has been tasked with looking into it, and his dad has been a member of the special police for years. So I want to really thank both of you for what you've done.
Amen. Amen. I always wanted to make sure that your Sunday dinners were going to be okay.
He's still talking.
No, that's good. So, well, that's a tough one to follow, Dolly, but we're ending with you. Any...
I just will share with you that the town clerk's office is very busy collecting town county property taxes.
Thank you. Well, unless anybody else has anything else, this meeting is officially closed.